Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Darren, and after watching the Legionals over in EU, I got inspired to talk a little bit about CC in World of Warcraft, and mostly the CC breakers. Ever since Legion new honor system, we have had a more variety of dealing with CC in the game. We have your Gladiator's Medallion, which is your normal medallion from before. We have Adaptation, which replaces your Gladiator's Medallion, allowing you to trinket out of any CC of 5 seconds duration or longer every 1 minute, giving you a lot more ample time with CC, but not as much of flexibility. Or Relentless, reducing all CC effects by 25% flat. With so much variety, it allowed a lot of players, especially with the addition of Gladiator's Medallion, to play Horde. I feel like a lot of players were able to play Horde simply because the human racial no longer is the Gladiator's Medallion. While it kind of still functions a lot like Gladiator's Medallion because it covers a big variety of CC, mostly being stuns, which are pretty rampant in the game. I feel like the addition to enable everybody on the Horde with the Gladiator's Medallion just like that allowed the Horde to flourish and spread in PvP. One of the reasons why I want Horde is I feel like the ratios for the Horde, especially for PvP, are very strong. No matter whether you play Undead, Orc, Blood Elf, Troll, not as much as Goblin, as much as I would want to say. Really any race on the Horde, for the most part, is very viable for PvP and is very strong for the most part. And that's what I enjoy on the Horde side. Now, the question is, after watching Legionals, we saw a lot of players utilize Alliance racials and Alliance race choices, but some of the different combinations of Adaptation, Relentless, and the Human Trinket. My question is to you, do you think the Alliance choice, where you actually have a little bit of variety for CC breakers, do you think Alliance CC breakers, primarily the human ones, are still better in some case or another, and that's the reason why EU was able to play them in Legionals? Or do you think the Horde ones and what is provided to you with the racials that are able to be offensive and CC enabling and be able to give you extra capability for PvP strictly, which I feel like are strong? Do you think the Horde racials and the CC breakers that you have are stronger, or do you think the Alliance with the variety of CC breakers that they have is the stronger option? But before you guys call your shots, let me first talk a little bit about the CC you are given and give you some of my own input on how I feel about all the CC. So I'm going to take a look at the Horde side. We actually have some really interesting options, and overall this is the options that you guys will probably know as those are basically, while they are interesting, those are basically the staple options. We'll take a look at the Horde characters. First of all, we take a look at the racials. Undead, for example, have a racial to be able to get out of fears once in a while, but I don't think that racial is quite as good as that of a human. While it is a good racial and definitely does have its purpose in PvP and Legion and does have its usefulness against certain classes, it is nowhere as strong as a stun racial. But anyway, let's take a look at the PvP trinkets. First of all, we have Gladiator's Medallion, which is one most people currently are running. It is a good trinket, gives you a 2-minute cooldown on your trinket, and just really good setup. It's just the staple setup what everybody knows. When we take a look at some of the other talents, like for example Adaptation, you get this interesting effect that Adaptation brings to the table, where you basically don't use your trinket ever. You simply just don't ever press your trinket button. You might as well take it off your bars. Just as long as you never press it, you'll get the effect of Adaptation, which will basically function like a trinket, removing a loss of control effect, or a CC, that is longer in duration of 5 seconds or more. So if you have a CC that's going to be like a full stun or a full blind or even a full sap in some cases, it'll trinket the first CC. Now this is useful in some cases and this isn't useful in others. As far as I understand, this talent is dumb. As far as I understand, which I've seen before, is I sap an enemy, he trinkets instantly, and then there we go. I already busted out their Adaptation. They won't have a trinket for any of my other CC afterwards. So Adaptation is an interesting talent and would be run in certain situations. I feel like definitely not against rogues, mainly because you can literally force it through a sap, and then bam, you already have a lineup on the enemy with nothing to do except whatever defenses they can use, even if they can use defenses while they are CC'd. But Adaptation brings something new to the table. It allows classes such as casters or mages or healers or even certain DPS that are going to be taking a full duration of CC to be able to have Adaptation. So for classes and combination of comps that are about lineups every few minutes or so, well, let's say every minute they try to line up, Adaptation breaks you out of it, so you're not really hindered by it. Next, when you would have your DPS maybe pull up defensives and then another DPS peel for the whoever is getting trained. Then next setup, you have your trinket again. Adaptation throws in a curveball with the idea that everyone has the mindset of everyone's running Gladiator's Medallion. 2-minute cooldown. All your add-ons say the same exact thing, but Adaptation does something different. It gives you a 1 minute cooldown on your trinket as long as you never use Honorable Medallion. Now, the ability is just overall an interesting ability in general, and I feel like it serves a little bit more use for the Alliance. But it's just an interesting curveball, and it gives you so many more options, especially when the games become something you expect. After you play in arenas for a long while, a lot of players would expect certain things out of certain classes. For example, oh, here it seems like, you know, the Rogue and the Mage are about to do a lineup. It seems that the Shadow Priest and the Mage are about to do some kind of a lineup. Like, those kind of things become something more apparent, something you do expect. So in this way, adaptation is able to counter it because you are expecting it. So in a way, it's more about expectation game, but that basically tells you that you need to know the meta. Outside of that, in PG's, adaptation can be used just as a way to get, you know, CC taken off of you whenever you get a full duration CC, basically saying that you'll never sit a full duration CC. This goes for stuns that are trying to kill you or CC that are trying to take you out of the game. So whether you heal or DPS, this is actually kind of viable. The next we have on the list is Relentless. Also replaces Honorable Medallion. Again, you just wouldn't hit Honorable Medallion button at all. Passive, duration of incoming crowd control effects is reduced by 25%, flat. Now this one is a really interesting one. The best use I have for it though is for healers and DPS. For healers, if you're kind of expecting for the enemy to try to draw your trinket out, and maybe like after multiple attempts, it is difficult to draw your trinket out. The best combination for this would be an Orc Relentless, because stuns are so rampant in the game. You have 20% CC reduction for stuns, and then Relentless 25% reduction against effects as well. Whether the math is additive or multiplicative, which is one of the ways Blizzard sometimes does their math, whether it's additive or multiplicative, it still has a lot of CC reduction. So with stuns being the primarily CC in the game, and other CC like polymorphs and blinds, out of a 6-second CC, you're able to shave off 1.5 seconds of that CC, which is pretty major because it tells the enemy team that you're not going to be sitting CC quite as often. So getting lineups on you back to back is going to be a little bit more challenging, as a polymorph won't be a full 6 seconds. The enemy still has to recast a polymorph or recast their CC to reapply it. It's a lot more manageability for the enemy. So Relentless is another type of curveball, and all of them are very, very interesting. I feel like for the Horde side, Gladiator's Medallion or Adaptation or Relentless are decent, but this is how it breaks down. Gladiator's Medallion is the staple that most people run. Adaptation is when you know you're going to get a setup on yourself for a full duration CC and you want to avoid it as much as possible, or you're simply running Battlegrounds. Relentless is probably best for arenas and BGs if you know you're not going to be trained that much. I feel like Relentless is better for healers and for DPS that are not going to be the kill targets. But that's really as far as it goes. For the most part, I feel like the Horde, in the most part, Gladiator's Medallion is the better option. Gladiator's Medallion offers you the CC breaker you need whenever you need it at a 2-minute cooldown. Relentless is interesting with the Orc racial simply because there's so many rampant stuns in the game that getting less duration for CC on stuns basically saves your life and gives you so much more value. As far as I see adaptation, it's just like difficult. Adaptation, Gladiator's Medallion, and Relentless are all very specific when it comes to high-rated arenas and are useful in specific situations. In most cases, Gladiator's Medallion for the Horde serves its purpose, and in Adaptation and Relentless, as the meta develops, one of those will be available for you, one or the other. But I feel like the humans actually have a little bit more variety and a little bit more of a better option when it comes to your CC breakers, mainly because of the human racial. For a while, I've been pretty happy with the fact that the human racial and humans are no longer the dominant race in the game, as they've got pretty boring and stale ever since everybody were basically forced to reroll for Warlords of Draenor. But with the Legionals that we saw in EU, it is possible to see that, hey, there's actually some merit to going full human. Mainly because, let's say I pick up normal talents like a normal would if I were to be playing subtlety, and we have the human racial. Since there's so many stuns in the game, human racial functions almost like as a normal pseudo trinket. And since you never have to use a trinket on Honorable Medallion, grabbing Gladiator's Medallion seems to be redundant. So as a human, you already have every man for himself, which breaks you out of most CC. So most of the CC are stuns. But then how do you deal with all the CC in the game? How would you deal with anything else that the game throws at you? You have Adaptation, which can get you out of certain CC, let's say a full blind or full polymorph, something your every man for himself can't get you out of. When it comes to stuns, sometimes adaptation will force you out of stuns, but it kind of depends on the situation. If you're the kind of player that you know you're going to be focused down from an enemy with a full duration blind or full duration polymorph, then adaptation ends up running out to be a little bit better of an option. In most cases, stuns go out onto the DPS that you're trying to kill or the healers you're trying to kill. If you are getting CC'd, most of the times it's going to be a clone, a fear, or a polymorph, which is going to be a full 6-second CC. So adaptation works in a way to predict the enemy. But I feel like for human, the best option in general is Relentless. You have your stun breaker against stuns. You are overall taking less CC from all sources, so you're not sitting in CC as often. And I feel like it gives you probably the most amount of versatility for PvP. 1. All CC that you're sitting, you are generating value off of those CC, no matter what CC it is, simply because you are human. 2nd, on stuns that are going to kill you, global you, or CC you, you are more likely to be able to get out of those and take action in order to be able to respond to an enemy's aggression with defensives or offensives of your own, or CC. I feel like at least for rogues, human is actually a very, very viable choice, mainly because Relentless and the human racial just combo so well together. Because of the human racial, which we talked about is not quite as good as it was, it is still a very, very useful racial. And I'm happy that it's not dominating the ladders, but it still is weird to see just how useful it is. Because stuns are so rampant in the game, every man for himself becomes basically a value of its own, almost like a trinket. I mean, it can get you out of fears, polymorphs, blinds, and a plethora of other CC, but it will get you out of stuns, and just about every single class in the game, even Shadowpriest now, have a stun. So to be able to get out of stuns, which is the majority of the CC, covers a pretty wide range of bases. And then you get an option, how do we want to deal with the rest of the CC? You have Relentless, which deals with everything, cuts it all down by 25%. We have Adaptation, which will trinket the first CC that isn't a stun, or if it is a stun, it'll trinket the first stun, whatever CC that lasts the longest. I don't know that many stuns that last as much as 6 seconds. A full kidney shot lasts 6 seconds. A between the eyes with a pull between the eyes at 6 common points for Outlaw Rogue lasts 6 seconds, but then you have to grab Deeper Stratagem. And that's really about it. Those are the only stuns in the game that last full 6 seconds. As far as I understand, most of the other stuns, like a Monk Kick, are a 5-second stun, unless I am wrong on that. Yep, next whip lasts for 5 seconds. So there's only a few amount of CC that lasts for about 6 seconds, or 5 or more, but even then, actually a 5-second stun with adaptation will still be broken out of. It still gives you a lot more options. I feel like humans just get a bit more option on how they want to deal with CC. And I feel like having a human racial with Relentless is probably like one of the nastiest combos ever. Yes, while CCs are rampant, you're always constantly generating value. Every time you're sitting in CC, you're generating value because you're reducing that CC. And then you have Adaptation, you have Gladius Medallion, and as a human you can go Adaptation and Human Trinket. You can go Human Trinket and Relentless. There is a few options for you. On the Horde side, while you can go Adaptation and while you can go Relentless, they're usually went in specific situations. So in most cases, Gladius Medallion seems to be the better option. I just feel like because of the human racial and the way that I guess the humans are, allows Alliance to be able to have a different kind of CC management and a little bit more variety to the playstyle. Like for example, to be able to get out of full blind and then get full stun and be able to get out of it with your human racial is insane. No one will lock you down, whether you're a DPS or a healer or whatever. And I just feel like it's kind of crazy. I just want to talk a little bit about it because after seeing Legionals, it was just insane. Just insane to see just how the EU teams were able to utilize the human racials and the, I guess, Alliance racials in general to the full capability when just about everybody on the ladders and just majority of the players that switch Horde were pretty convinced that Horde was the way to go. But maybe it's just one of those differences that we have between EU ladders and US ladders. We'll just have to see that in the future. But this is just some thoughts that I had. So what are your thoughts on that, guys? What are your thoughts on the CC breakers? Do you think Horde is the better option with the stronger DPS racials as well as the, I guess, staple DPS staple CC breakers as you are given, even though some are better used specifically, still pretty good staple? Or do you think the human and the Alliance ends up taking the bigger cut out of the deal? Do you think the human rogue ends up being just the more variety, the more viable style, mainly because it has just so much more to work with. What are your thoughts on that, guys? I would like to hear from you guys in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.